Please put your hands together for Isaac. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. Good evening. Before I start, I want to thank Pastor Adam and Pastor Michelle for giving it another opportunity to share the word. Like I've said earlier times, when your pastor would trust you to use the pulpit, it means a lot to me, and I'm thankful to pastors for that. So before I started the movie, I said I started the movie. Okay. Before I start with what I shared today, I just want to give you one verse in which I will be ending today. So that will be kind of the climax, or that will be the end, what we'll have today. I'll give that verse, and then I will start from what I wanted to share today. And that verse would be Joshua chapter 24, verse 13. I have given you a land for which you did not labor, and cities which you did not build, and you dwell in them. You eat of the vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. So this is the verse in which I will be ending today, and this will be kind of the climax of what I'm going to see today. But today's study will be actually on towards our vision. So this month is a month where it's declared about Vision 2020 and the double vision, what we see over here. And what I'm going to share today is our journey towards our vision. All of us, I know, would have some words spoken over us, or prophecy spoken over us, or somebody cast a vision over us. Or we as a church by itself, we had a vision cast on this church last week. So all of us have, or when you read the Bible, there is this particular verse which came as a promise to you. And you believe, and you're holding on to that verse and believe that God will fulfill it for you. So most of us have some vision in towards which we're journeying to. So what I'm going to see today is under the title, Towards Our Vision. And why I want to share upon this is the most critical path in a Christian life is not the actual vision itself, or for me it's mostly the journey towards our vision. Because many times when the vision happens, that's the finale, that's the final thing which happens. But most of the time our walk in faith, our faith journey is defined by how we walk towards our vision, or in other words, how God would take you towards your vision. And that is what I wanted to share today under the title, Towards Your Vision, or what God has promised to you, or in other words, towards the vision that God has promised for this church. To see that, I want to take one particular example from the Bible, a very famous example from the Bible, and see how God led that vision into fulfillment, or what happened for those people when they journeyed towards the vision. And that is seen the vision that God gave Abraham. We'll pick the story in Genesis chapter 15 and verse 1. It says, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abraham, I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. Genesis chapter 15, if you would go back and read, there is the place where God is appearing to Abraham in a vision and is giving him multiple blessings, is promising him multiple things. And one of the blessings that he says is in verse number 7. Then he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit. So today we are going to see the journey of Abraham and his children, or in other words, children of Israel, towards this vision that was given to them. In Genesis chapter 15 and verse 7, this particular promise is telling them that one day their descendants will inherit the promised land, that is the land of Canaan. So today what you're going to see is this journey that these children of Israel had towards their promised land. And that we see, if you go through the Bible, there are multiple places where this narrative has been told, where the story has been told by different people. Moses says it in one place. Joshua talks about it. But the narrative which I have picked for this evening is what God himself describes how this vision happened for the children of Israel. He starts from what he promised to Abraham, and then it goes until the children of Israel go into Canaan. And this is the narrative which we see in Joshua chapter 24, verses 3 to 12. And I'm going to pick on this particular narrative for the reason this narrative is told by God himself. And obviously, whatever he says in these 8 or 9 verses is what happened to the children of Israel over the period of 450 years. Assume you're meeting a friend after 10 years and you're catching up with each other. So you want to fill in with your friend with what happened to you in the last 10 years. Obviously, you won't be telling him every detail. So you'll be picking the highlights to him or her, whatever you're going to share. So basically what you'll be doing is whatever you thought was the most important thing that happened to you in the last 10 years, those are the highlights you'll be telling your friend. The same way, that is the reason I picked up this particular narrative, because God is describing what he did to the children of Israel over the period of 450 years and is picking up only a particular highlights and is telling about those particular things. So that is what I wanted to share today when I want to talk about the children of Israel's journey towards the vision. The reason I'm doing that is, just like I told earlier, we also are journeying towards God's promise in our life. We are also walking towards God's vision in our life. And the reason we want to receive this is to encourage ourselves to see how this journey will happen. And second, to claim these promises in our life also. If God would do it to Abraham, you do it to us too. Because through Christ, we are also the children of Abraham. So we also inherit everything that God had promised Abraham to also. So having said that, we'll go to Joshua chapter 24, verse number 3. I think I started reading this before the holidays. And I tell you, over the holidays, over the period of 3 weeks, I've been stuck on these 2 chapters, Joshua chapter 23 and Joshua chapter 24. I've been going up and down only on these 2 chapters. For some reason, over the holidays, I couldn't move away from these chapters. And I wanted to, and that could be one of the reasons why I picked on this particular passage to talk about today. So first thing I would go from verse number 3. It says, "Then I took your father Abraham from the other side of the river, led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac." He multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac. Can anybody say what is wrong with this verse? Or what seemingly looks kind of odd in this verse? Something in the sequencing of this verse, something that strikes you odd in this verse. Exactly. So this verse, when I read it, it struck me because just like she said, first it says, multiplied his descendants, and then it says, and gave him Isaac. You would logically expect the verse should have gone something like, led him throughout all the land of Canaan, gave him Isaac, and multiplied his descendants. But for some reason, this verse goes the other way around. It says, multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac. I was thinking about this verse, and what it told me is, this is what it taught me. In God's eyes, first he multiplied and then gave him Isaac. In other words, in God's realm, in God's thinking, in God's plan, he first finished everything. Then he went back to Abraham and started with Isaac. Okay? In other words, he fulfilled everything he promised Abraham, okay, in the spiritual realm. For God's hand, he actually finished everything. And then he goes back and starts with Abraham. Okay? In the same way, in God's eyes, whatever he has promised you, whatever vision he has given you, is already finished it. It is done. God does not have to do anything new to accomplish it for you. In God's eyes, it's already done. Then he comes back to you and he starts with you. Or if you could put it in a different way, God is not contained by time. Okay? So whatever God has promised you, whatever God has told he'll fulfill in your life, in his eyes, he's already been there. In the realm of time, he's already stepped into that date where God will fulfill everything that he's promised you. Now he comes back to your current date and starts with you. So that is the only way I could define this verse. That's the only way I could comprehend this verse. Because it says, first he took him all over Canaan, multiplied his descendants when he did not even have a single child, And then he starts with Isaac. So God finishes it and then comes back to the beginning. So that's how God works with this vision. So in your eyes, whatever you're aspiring for, whatever you're believing in God for, in God's eye, it's all done. Okay, he's all figured it out. He's seen the end already. Okay, even when he's talking to you today. Okay, thus that takes us to verse number 4. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. To Esau I gave the mountains of Seir to possess. But Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. Actually, I was telling you some time back, I was going back on chapter 23 and 24. One of the reasons I was stuck was because of this particular verse. If you see this verse, it says, to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. Among Jacob and Esau, who you think inherited the promise? Jacob. Okay. Who you think was loved by God? Jacob. Okay. And actually God says, Esau I hated, Jacob I loved. Because Jacob found mercy in the eyes of God. So Esau was hated by God. Another thing we know the story, when Isaac was willing to give the blessing, okay, basically this inheritance, what he got from Abraham, which is going to pass it down, okay, he gives it to Jacob. He does not give it to Esau. So there is this person who is hated by God, who did not receive the blessings, who did not receive the inheritance, and there's another person who God loved and God to whom God had promised. But if you see this verse, it says, to Esau I gave the mountains of Seir to possess, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. So what we see over here is, the one that God hated, God does inheritance immediately. The person who was without the promise, he reached faster. Because for Esau, what was promised was the mountains of Seir. For Jacob, what was promised was the land of Canaan. But what we see over here is, Esau, he got his inheritance immediately. He got his promise immediately. The person who was hated by God, he got his promise immediately. But the person who was loved by God, who was a heir to the inheritance, he had to go away from Egypt. Actually, he was living in Canaan at that point of time, Jacob. He had to move away and go to Egypt. And this is what spoke to me, and this is one of the reasons that made me study this more and more. Because this struck me, because in God's eyes, or in other words, the pursuit of God's vision always defies logic. If you're going to see it in your own eyes of how God is going to lead you towards your vision, it will defy logic. Many times it will make little sense. Most times it will make no sense. Okay, if you see over here, to Jacob it made no sense. He was supposed to have the promise. He was supposed to be loved by God, but he has to move away from his inheritance. But Esau, he was all set. He already had his inheritance. So before I go on and talk about how the children of Israel's pursuit was towards the vision, before I dwell more on that, I just want you to have this thought in the back of your mind. God's leading towards a vision will not always make sense to you. It always will not follow man's logic. It's going to be in God's realm. It's going to be according to God's wisdom. And many times, you will not be able to figure it out. Many times, you will not be able to explain it, how God was going to lead you towards your vision. And having said that, next I will go on towards the next few verses of how God is narrating how He brought the children of Israel towards their vision, towards their promise. After you see the next few verses, I could point out 7 signs which God did for the children of Israel before it got them to the promised land. Or in other words, like I told you earlier, when God is narrating this 450 years, He's highlighting 7 different things. And that I would take it as signs, that I would take it as pointers, that I would take it as a reference to put it or applying it to my life, to what God has promised me, or how God is going to take me towards my vision. How God is going to take this church towards the vision that God has promised this church. So there are 7 things that God does and God is talking about in this place. The first sign we see is in verse number 4. It says, it's actually the last part, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. This is the first sign we see. We see over here, Jacob, when he went down to Egypt from the promised land, we know the story. Jacob was living with his children. At that point of time, his family was around 70 members. because he had 12 children, their wives, their children, and other things. I think they were around 70, and they're living in Canaan. At that point of time, there was a famine. But you know the story, Joseph went away to Egypt. Now he's the big guy in Egypt. He's the number 2 in Egypt. Now he's calling back to his father and telling, why do you want to die in the famine? Come out to Egypt. I'm the big guy here. I'll make sure you live a comfortable life. So at that point of time, Jacob is planning to go to Egypt. He has the option, but he's afraid to go to Egypt. We go to Genesis chapter 46 and verse 3. It says, I am God, the God of your father. This is God talking to Jacob when he's preparing to go to Egypt. I am God, the God of your father. Do not fear to go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation there. I will make of you a great nation there. The first sign which you see for the children of Israel is sometimes growth comes in a place away from God's inheritance for us. I'll repeat it. Sometimes growth comes in a place away from God's inheritance for us. If you see the verse over here, Jacob's inheritance was Canaan, but God is telling, go to Egypt. And I'm going to have my blessings because your growth is going to happen in Egypt. Okay? So that's the first sign we see in what happened to the children of Israel. So what I'm trying to say today is, sometimes we might have to move away from what we think was God is taking us to. We believe God has taken us to a particular place or a particular situation or a particular career or a particular whatever you may be doing in your life, okay? And we think this is the place where God is going to bless us. And that could be a situation where God is going to take you away from this place. And just like the promise in this verse is saying, even though I'm going to take you away from the place what I promised to you, I'm going to take you out for a reason, because I'm going to bring growth to you away from your place of inheritance. Just like it happened to Jacob. Jacob is telling, Jacob's growth happened in Egypt, whereas his promised land was Canaan. And he had to go away to Egypt to grow. So that is why in the same way, do not be worried if you're in a place away from what God had promised you. Because all it means is it could be growth time for you. Probably God had promised you that you're going to do ministry in a particular place. Or God has promised you in your vision that He's going to use you among this particular group of people. Or God has promised you this is the particular talent in which He's going to propel you into your vision. But now all you see is something totally unrelated to what God has told you. Probably He's using some part of you or a talent of you which is not even related to what God has promised to you. Or probably God is using you among a set of people when God has told you, I'm going to use you in somewhere else. Or probably God has taken you to a particular place when He told you, He'll actually take you to a different place. Do not be worried about it. Do not be confused. Do not think God has forgotten you. But just like you see in this verse, He's telling, I'm going to take you away because our growth is going to come for you in a different place. So the second sign, the first sign what we see is, for the children of Israel, there was a season when they had to move away from their inheritance. There was a season when they had to let go of their inheritance because God for them is going to bring growth to them in a different place. So even in our pursuit of a vision, that could be a time when we are in a place which we thought was never part of our vision. But God is telling, do not be afraid, because that is the place where I'm going to make you grow. That is the place I'm going to build you spiritually. That is the place I'm going to strengthen you. That is the place I'm going to make you into a vast army. And that is the first sign you're going to see. That takes us to the second sign we see in verse number 5. Also I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt according to what I did among them. Afterward, I brought you out. The second sign we see, also I sent Moses and Aaron. Who is Moses? Moses, at this point of time, when these children were there in Egypt, this is after 400 years when God is going to deliver them. Who is Moses? He is the least likely to deliver them. At that point of time, he was in a least likely place. He was somewhere in the desert taking care of his father-in-law's sheep. He was the least likely guy in this least likely place, and God is going to bring Moses to deliver them. So what I'm trying to say is, the person who will usher you towards your vision could be now in a place you least expect. That could be some person you're going to come in contact in the coming days. That could be some talent or some career or some job or whatever it could be. It could be now in a remote place you do not even think about. I don't think the children of Israel thought about Moses could be the deliverer. And Moses himself was in a least likely place, is doing the least likely job. How do you think a person taking care of his father-in-law's sheep, it is not even his own sheep, his father-in-law's sheep, is going to be the deliverer of almost 2 million people. So that is what is happening over here. So in the second sign what you see in your path to your vision, God is preparing someone in the least likely place to come in and to be the part of the puzzle to take you towards your vision. And among the children of Israel, for the children of Israel, Moses was a missing in action. That's this guy who grew up in the palace. One day he showed up, he told he was going to be the deliverer. Then he ran away for his life. And for the children of Israel, probably he was dead. He's missing in action. But he was the person that God is going to bring back to take them to the vision. So what I'm trying to say over here is, someone you never thought you will see again could be getting prepped up in an unknown land right now. Some person who disappeared in your life, or some talent which you thought is disappeared in your life, something which you had, some resource you had is no longer in your life. God is preparing it in a different place to bring you back in the life, to take you towards your vision. That is the second sign. And the third thing in this, what I learned is, Moses himself was a failure. He thought he was a deliverer 40 years prior. We know the story where Moses comes out of the palace. He sees his people being persecuted. He tries to go to help them by killing 2 Egyptians. But what happens? He has to run for his own life and run away to the desert. Moses himself was a failure. And that is the person that God is going to bring back as their champion. So in the same way, the person or the talent or the skill which failed you years ago, something you thought you were good at, but that never took you so far. Something you think you had at one point in your life, but now you do not have. Something you thought someone that has done in your life some years ago, but now is no longer in the life. That could be the same failure point which God could use to take you to your next success, which to take you to your vision. Okay. So that's the second sign which we see over here. Things which has gone away in your life, things is no longer in your life, God could be using to bring back to your vision. Okay. That takes us to the third sign, verses 6 and 7. Then I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and he came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued your fathers with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. So they cried out to the Lord, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, brought the sea upon them and covered them. And the eyes saw what I did in Egypt. Then you dwelt in the wilderness a long time. What you see over here is the third sign. So they cried out to the Lord. That has been a situation in my life. I remember a day way back in 2004 when everything was going wrong for me. Actually, on that particular, it was Saturday morning. And that particular day, I got news which basically swamped me down. I knelt down to pray. I did not have the words to pray. I do not know what to pray for even, because things just put me down. And I remember the prayer that day, I just praying in tears or crying. I did not even know what to pray for. And I tell you, that was the most effective prayer I would have ever made. Because that same afternoon, I saw the biggest miracle happen in my life. So what I'm trying to say is, when you're pursuing a vision, you could be swamped in all directions. There could be situations where the situation leaves you stunned. You could hear a news which will leave you stunned, or you do not know what to even pray for, or what to even ask for. I tell you, just calling on the name of Jesus, just the cry out to Jesus could be the biggest miracle in your life. So that's the third sign which I want to talk to you about. Just crying out. Just calling upon the name of Jesus. Sometimes it could be eloquent, quote verses, all good. But many times I tell you, just a cry out from a heart will break you to the biggest breakthrough in your life. More about this third sign is, if you see Israel, just think you're the children of Israel. Forward is the Red Sea, and back is the chariots of Pharaoh chasing you. At that point of time, Egypt was a superpower. There is no other power greater than Egypt at that point of time. And those guys' biggest weapon was chariots. So that's behind you. You can't even run away from them because the Red Sea is before you. There are two different things which was pressing them in. But what you see, how God delivers them is in a very unique way. Because you see, if you just think about it, opposition 1 was the sea before them. Opposition 2 was the army behind them. But if you see how God's situation is, he makes opposition 1 observe opposition 2. Another way what he does is, he makes the enemy number 1 take over enemy number 2. So the water took over them, and these guys could just slip through. That's the unique way in which God would do it for them. So the same way, when you are hemmed in with opposition all around, when you do not know whether you want to go forward or you want to go back, because you just saw God got a great deliverer in Moses, you thought now you're right, everything is all done, you're all settled, you're just going to go possess your land, go possess your vision is right before you, and you see this situation. You cannot go forward, you cannot go back. Probably you're thinking, I might as well even remain in Egypt. Why did God bring this Moses guy to deliver me just to get stuck over here? I tell you, that could be the time when God is showing you a sign. Because if you see this end of the verse, it says, and your eyes saw what I did to Egypt. So basically, God brought them to the situation so that he could show them an unique time wherein the enemies which come against them will fight among themselves and they will be delivered. So the sea which is before them would let them go past, but the sea would take over the Egypt's army. So that's the third sign which you see over here. And verse number 7, if you go before you go on to the fourth sign, you guys with me, or I'm just rambling on and okay. Okay. So verse number 7, before you go on to the fourth sign, we'll just see verse number 7. The last line in verse number 7. Then you dwelt in the wilderness a long time. How many of you know, in the wilderness, God did so many miracles. God did so many signs and the miracles. But for some reason, in this narrative, God does not talk about those. Because in the wilderness, he turns the bitter water into sweet water. He brings the manna to them in a supernatural way. He brings all those birds as food. He does so many miracles, but in this narrative, he never talks about it. And what that taught me is, this wilderness was never part of God's plan for Israel. You remember the vision which God talked about? It was never the part of his plan. It was because these people disobeyed and God had to make them take around the wilderness. It was something that Israel brought among themselves. But the reason, so it was never part of God's plan. So when God is highlighting this 450 years, he wouldn't talk about the miracles he did in the wilderness. What I want you to be encouraged by this is, sometimes we may make poor choices. But even in the poor choices, even though it is not part of God's plan, he would still do miracles for you. He will still feed you. He will still give you the desires of your heart. He will still take you to the sweet waters, even in the time which is away from your plan. So that is what I wanted to say to encourage before I go on to the fourth sign. And fourth sign is in verse number 8. And I brought you into the land of the Amorites who dwelt on the other side of Jordan, and they fought with you. But I gave them into your hand that you might possess their land, and I destroyed them from before you. And I brought you into the land of the Amorites. Israel did not go there. God himself brought them into the land of the Amorites. And what did they see? Amorites are not there with a welcome sign for them. They are there to fight and kill them. But who got them there? God brought them there. But what you see over here, God brought them there to a place of opposition only so that they'll have two blessings. One, they'll defeat the Amorites. Two, they will possess the land. So what I'm trying to say is, the fourth sign in your pursuit to your vision, in the fourth sign in your pursuit to God has blessed you, God may take you to unfavorable places. Some places you thought that is God's will that you have to take up the job, or it was God's will that you want to deal with this particular ministry, or it was God's will that you have to do this particular thing. But you could find failures, you could find opposition, or you could find things that may not go according to your plan. But what I want to encourage you in this fourth sign is, God set it up for you so that he can bless you 2 times over. He can bless you 2 times over. He wanted to give the Amorites into their hands, and he also wanted to give the land of the Amorites into the Israel's hand. And that is why he brought them over here. Suppose if God had not taken them into the land of Amorites, they would not have inherited these 2 blessings. So that's the fourth sign. When you see things going against you, when you think it was God's will that you came here, only to see opposition. Or when you say, God, I thought you wanted me to take this job. Or what I see here is people just coming against me. I thought you wanted me to move into this neighborhood. I thought you wanted me to take up this particular vocation or this particular ministry. But all I see is people coming against me. All you see here is God himself will bring you into situations where you might see opposition, but it's just a setup because he wants to bless you 2 times over. He just wants to give you 2 times over for all the trouble that you had to go through. So that's the 4th sign you will see. When you go past your vision, when you go towards your vision, when you pursue what God has given you, is God will bless you 2 times over. God will take you to places where not everyone is going to welcome you. Not everyone is going to like you. Not everything you do is going to prosper because he wants to bless you 2 times over. That will take you to the 5th sign, which you see in verse number 9 and 10. Then Balak, the son of Zippor, the king of Moab, arose to make war against Israel and sent and called Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse you. But I would not listen to Balaam. Therefore, he continued to bless you. So I delivered you out of his hands. Some battles are conventional. Some battles are spiritual. Something is just physically seen. You can just see people don't like you, like what the Amorites did to them. Some you don't even see. Because somebody is there putting curses on you. Somebody is there trying to do things against you. Something is not even visible to your eyes. Because I believe the children of Israel were there in the valley, and there is Balaam somewhere up on the hill trying to put curses on them. I don't think these guys saw Balaam. I don't think these guys saw that somebody is trying to curse them down. But what I'm trying to say is, whatever it might be, it could be a conventional opposition or it could be a spiritual opposition. Opposition is seen in your eyes. Suppose you do not even know that people are plotting against you. Whatever it could be, God is the final judge. God is watching out for you. He'll make sure everything planned against you will turn into a blessing. If you see this verse, it says, I will not listen to Balaam. What is Balaam doing? Cursing the children of Israel. Therefore, he continued to bless you. The guy came out to do some sort of a witchcraft against them, some sort of a curse against them. God is telling, I'll make the same guy to bless you. The reason I'm telling you is, when you're pursuing your vision, when you're pursuing what you thought God has promised you, do not worry when people do things against you in the hidden, or people talk behind you, or if you see politics being played. God brought you into a situation, you see being trying gossip or whatever. Things happening unknown to you, things happening behind your back. Whatever it is, the 5th sign, what I see now here, God is telling you is, do not worry. I'll make sure every curse turns into a blessing. I'll make sure the same guy who tries to curse you, I'll make the same mouth to bless you. Because this guy came to curse him, now the same mouth is blessing him. It could be a different scenario if God has shut him down. But what God is, in his unique way or in a sense of humor or whatever way God wants to show his power, he makes the same guy to praise him, to bless him. So that's the 5th sign you see in your pursuit to your vision. God is the final judge who will turn every plan against you for you. That takes us to the 6th sign, verse number 11. Then you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, and the men of Jericho fought against you. Also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girshites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. But I delivered them into your hand. This is the final purge. 8 nations against them. One after another, after another, after another. 8 people coming against them. Sometimes, like they're saying, when it rains, it pours. Okay? When things go wrong, everything goes wrong. You just thought you woke up with a headache and you go to work, something else happened, then you go with something else, then that's the day your car will go down. That's the day everything will go down. It just comes one after one after one after one. When it just keeps coming. But usually what I've seen, at least in the children of Israel, what we see is they are in the brink of the miracle. They're in the brink of possessing Canaan. And that's the time they have to fight 8 people, one after another after another. So what I'm trying to say is, usually when you're in the brink, you will see the maximum opposition. Or in other words, when you see multiple things going wrong, hang on, you could be on the brink of your miracle. When you see everything is going wrong, God brought you along so long. He got Moses to deliver you. You saw the miracle of the Red Sea. You saw the double blessing with the Amorites. You saw Balaam trying to curse you, now starting to bless you. You saw all this blessing. And now we see the final tide against you. It's like a tsunami against you. 8 people coming against you. But all we see over there is, it was the brink of the miracle. So when you see things going against you, especially if multiple things are going against you, in a way, that's the time you can rejoice. That's the time you can make your hopes really go high, because promises which was waiting for many years to happen in your life, you could just be on the threshold of it. You could just be next to it. So whenever many things are going against you, that is the time when you're at the brink of a miracle. Don't give up. I think there's a song, don't give up on the brink of a miracle. So when you see these 8 nations coming against you, just like it happened for the children of Israel, 8 things going wrong in your life, one thing I can see, it could be the last step before you possess your miracle. So that's the 6th sign which God talks about in verse number 11. And going on, we see the 7th sign. The reason I'm telling you is later going home, I would encourage you to read Joshua chapter 24, verses 3 to 13. Because I believe when you read it in your personal meditation, God will speak to you in a unique way according to your life, according to your purpose, according to your vision. I believe God will speak to you more through this passage according to your thing, because only you and God knows what exactly He has planned for you, what exactly you're going through in your life. So when you read this, I encourage you, God will speak to you more specifically according to your particular vision in your life. Having said that, I'll go to the last sign which God says, 7th sign, verse number 12. I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out from before you. Also the 2 kings of the Amorites, but not with your sword or with your bow. But not with your sword or with your bow. It was God all along, and their weapons was never effective. The reason why I call this a 7th sign is, sometimes you might think you're not talented enough, or sometimes you might think you do not have the resources, or sometimes you might think God has given me this vision, but I don't think I have the talents enough to fulfill that vision in my life. What I'm trying to tell you is, don't worry about it, because even if you had the talents, even if you have the resources, God is not going to use it anyway. Because what you're going to see over here is telling, it's not your sword. Even if you have your sword or don't have your sword, makes no difference. But God is telling, I'm not going to use it anyway. Because it's going to be my power. It is going to be my will that is going to bring your victory. The battle is not yours, but mine. So that is what God is telling. Don't worry if you're not equipped enough. Don't worry if you have lack. Since what you have will not take you through, but what God will bring in on your behalf. So even if you do not have your resources, even if you do not have the talents, even if you think you do not have the connections or whatever it might be, do not worry you don't have it, because even if you're going to have it, it makes no difference. Because God is telling, I'm not planning to use any of them, because it's going to be my power, my blessing upon your life, which is going to take you through. And that is the 7th sign which I wanted to say. This is the 7 things that God is highlighting in that narrative and telling, this is how I gave a vision to Abraham. This is how I brought the children of Israel to inherit the vision or inherit the blessing. But finally, in verse number 13, the vision becomes reality. And that's the verse which I first gave. Verse number 13. I have given you a land for which you do not labor, and cities which you did not build, and you dwell in them. You eat of the vineyards and olive groves, which you did not plant. So all those years Israel had to wander, somebody else was building the vision for them. I just want to sink that in. All those years, when these guys had to wander, somebody else was building the vision for them. And they just needed to move in and possess the land. And that is what God is telling you. It was not the actual vision, but how God built them up with the signs He showed them on their way to the vision. So the actual vision was a ready-made thing. Somebody else built the cities, somebody else planted the vineyards, somebody else did everything for them. So the actual vision, the children of Israel had to do nothing for the actual vision. But the main thing is the signs that God will do to them on their way to the vision. What He would do to them, what are the signs He would do to them, what are the things He will teach them, what are the faith that will develop in them, what are the things that God will show to them on their way to the vision. Because sometimes when we are wandering the best years of our life, when we are seeing, when we see where God is delaying things for us, things are not happening for us, God is telling, do not worry about that wasted time, because somebody else is fulfilling your vision for you. Somebody else is building it for you. Somebody else is doing it for you. So the years, do not fret that years are going by with no progress. So since irrespective of when you arrive in your vision, somebody else is already working and building on your behalf. So what I want to say over here is, the physical part of your vision was built by somebody else when God was building your spiritual part. I'll repeat it. The physical part of your vision, somebody else is building when God is working on your spiritual part. It was the journey to the vision which God is focusing on. Because God is telling, when the time is coming, somebody is already ready-made. So all those days you have been wandering around, God is preparing it for you. So that when you go, you just got to go and inherit. So the years of waiting was never wasted. That is what I want to promise to you. So if you're waiting for your vision, as you're pursuing your vision, you see opposition, you see any of the 7 signs, with all those battles you have to do, all the struggles you have to do, all the journey of faith you have to do. I tell you, when you go to your actual vision, it's going to be marvelous. It is going to be more than you ever imagined, more than you ever thought. Because when the children of Israel, when they went to their vision, they thought probably land of milk and honey, so they thought probably we'll get a cluster of grapes in a hand. But when they actually went to the vision, when they actually saw the vision, it is a cluster, they need 2 people to carry a cluster of grapes. That is how marvelous it was when they went to the actual vision. So whatever God has promised you, you cannot even comprehend what it actually will be. That was what had happened to the children of Israel. Because when they went and saw it, it was much more than they ever thought. And that is what your vision is going to be. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth the time that you have to go through. It has to be worth every prayer you have to make. It is going to be worth every journey of faith you have to make. Everything you have to do has to be worth it. Because what God has planned for you is much bigger than everything. So what I want to say in all this, and finally conclude on this, is, actually chapter 24 is not even about the vision. It's not even about the journey to the vision. Because we go and read chapter 24, that's the famous chapter where it says, as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Ultimately, it's all about you serving the Lord. It's all about your heart. It's all about the relationship that God wants to have with you. Ultimately, it's all about your worship to God. Because you go and read chapter 24, he says all these things. And finally, he ends with the one thing. It's what I promised you I will do. I will show you all these signs. I will show you all these promises. And I will fulfill everything that I promised you. And when I show you the final vision, it is going to be much bigger than you ever thought. But at the end of it, one question he has, will you serve me? At the end of it, one question is, will your heart be aligned to me? Will your heart always seek after me? Will your heart really, because all he wants is that love relationship he wants with your heart. The relationship that he wants with you. The worship that's going to come out of you. The servitude that's going to come out of you. And that is what is going to be a pleasing offering, a pleasing sacrifice before God. But what I see over here is, you see the vision, it's going to be beautiful, it's going to be good. And God, we go home and read, it's going to be the 7 signs he's going to do. And the journey to your vision is going to be going to be amazing. It's going to be a great testimony. End of it all, he says, will you serve me? End of it all he asked about the children of Israel is, I did all these things for you, but will you serve me? And that is what he's asking for all of us. In all in our life, that's like you saw in the vision, one of the reasons I believe God did all that, building them up on their way to the vision, is he wanted to build their heart. He wanted to show all the signs to them. He wanted to show all the miracles to them. He wanted to build their faith so that their heart would always turn before God. Will always look towards God. Because at the end of the day, it's all about we serving God. Sometimes our personal worship of God, our personal servitude to God is all that matters at the end of the day. And that is what, if you see Joshua chapter 24, it all ends with, will you serve me? God is telling, your journey is going to be amazing. And whatever I promised you, I'm going to do. Your journey towards, it's going to be amazing. I'm going to show you different signs. I'm going to show you things you cannot even imagine. At the end of the day, all he asks for is, will you serve me? Will your heart always reach out to me? You're going to go into a land where a cluster of grapes, you need 2 people to carry it. The blessings what you're going to inherit, the land in which you're going to step into, what he's going to do, it's going to be more than you even thought of. And God has already seen it, like we saw. He multiplied and then he started with Isaac. In God's eyes, he has seen your promise fulfilled. He has seen the amazing thing that is promised for you. But what he's asking today is, end of it all, I want a heart. Will you serve me? Thank you.